Auch ich bin der Überzeugung, dass damit seitens der Bevölkerung Böhmen und Mährens sinnbildliche Gesinnung und Reichstreue zum Ausdruck kommt, die Sie, Herr Staatspräsident,
He didn't begin as a monster. That's what makes Reinhard Heydrich's story so disturbing. From the outside, he looked polished, educated, disciplined, almost ordinary. He came from music, culture, and ambition.
He was the prototype of what Hitler had wished for. He was inhumanity personified.
He could play the violin beautifully. He trained hard. He dreamed big. But under that clean surface, something colder was growing. And when his life collapsed in 1931, the door opened to one of the darkest rises in modern history.
There were two souls in one breast.
Before the Nazis, Heydrich had wanted respect. He wanted rank. He wanted status. The Navy gave him that path, until scandal destroyed it. A broken engagement promise, lies, humiliation, and suddenly his career was over, expelled, disgraced, furious. For a man driven by pride, it was a brutal fall. But what happens when someone like that loses everything and then finds a movement that rewards cruelty, ambition, and control? That movement was Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party. At first, Heydrich was not some famous political believer. He was a ruined young officer looking for a new future. But his fiancée, Lena von Osten, was already deep in the Nazi world, and she pushed him toward it. Within weeks, Heydrich joined the Nazi Party. Soon after, he joined the SS, and from that moment, his life changed fast. Not slowly, not carefully, fast.
Himmler was his boss. Thanks to him, he became an intelligence man and was always being promoted. Himmler knew only too well that without Heydrich, he was nothing. He could never have achieved such power if it hadn't been for Heydrich.
Then came the meeting that changed everything. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, gave Heydrich a test. Explain how to build an intelligence service for the Nazi movement. Heydrich had little real experience, but he had one dangerous gift. He could think like a machine. He understood information, pressure, weakness, fear. In that meeting, Himmler saw something sharp and cold in him. Not warmth, not charisma, precision. And that was enough. Heydrich got the job. He started with almost nothing. One office, one typewriter, a few contacts. But what he began building became terrifying. Files, names, secrets, informants, political enemies, party rivals, even other Nazis. No one was safe from his system. Heydrich learned quickly that information was more powerful than shouting, more useful than speeches, more dangerous than a weapon. A gun could silence one person. A file could control hundreds. By the end of 1931, he was no longer just a disgraced ex-naval officer. He was becoming the man behind the curtain. And Germany was falling apart at the perfect time for someone like him.
He had no experience of the front, none at all. That was probably the decisive factor in him wanting to go. He wanted to be part of the action and would do anything to get there.
The Great Depression had wrecked lives. People were angry, hungry, desperate, and looking for someone to blame. Hitler's movement offered simple answers, loud promises, and enemies to hate. By 1932, the Nazi Party had become a major force. In January 1933, Hitler became chancellor. And once he had power, the system didn't just change, it snapped into place. Then came the Reichstag fire. The Nazis used it to crush civil rights almost overnight. Emergency powers gave them the excuse to arrest opponents, silence critics, and tear apart the Republic from inside. And Heydrich's intelligence network was ready. Lists grew, police powers expanded, fear moved into everyday life. People watched what they said, who they met, what they wrote, because now the state was listening.
But Heydrich had his own problem. Rumors returned that he had Jewish ancestry. Inside a regime obsessed with racial purity, this could have destroyed him. His enemies pushed hard. They wanted him removed, maybe even worse. But after an investigation, he was cleared. And instead of weakening him, the scandal made him even more determined, even more ruthless. He had survived a threat from inside the system, and now he understood exactly how deadly that system could be. So he helped sharpen it.
100 of us, and suddenly the order was given. All men out. My father began to cry. He kissed me, gave me his wristwatch. He knew it was the end.
With Himmler, Heydrich helped take control of police power in Germany. What had once been law enforcement became something different: surveillance, intimidation, and repression. Political opponents were tracked. Journalists were watched. Trade unionists, communists, social democrats, anyone labeled dangerous could be arrested. This was not justice. It was control dressed up as order. Then came Dachau. Officially, it was a camp for political prisoners. In reality, it became a model for something far darker. People could be taken without trial, held without real charges, and broken without the public seeing it. Fear became organized. Silence became survival. And Heydrich's system fed that machine with names, files, and targets. But inside the Nazi movement, another threat was growing: the SA. The SA was huge, violent, unpredictable, and its leader, Ernst Röhm, had become too powerful. Hitler decided they had to be crushed. Heydrich helped build the lists. On June 30th, 1934, during the Night of the Long Knives, arrests and executions swept through the movement. Rivals vanished. The SA was broken. The SS rose higher than ever. And Heydrich proved something chilling. He could help destroy enemies outside the party, and inside it too. From that moment, his power exploded. By the mid-1930s, Heydrich controlled intelligence and secret policing on a scale few men had ever touched. Surveillance, arrests, interrogation, files, everything connected. Officially, others stood above him. But in practice, Heydrich was becoming one of the most feared operators in Nazi Germany. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need crowds. He worked through systems. And systems can be far more frightening than rage. At the same time, the regime turned harder against Jewish communities. Step by step, rights were stripped away, jobs were restricted, freedom narrowed. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws made exclusion official. But behind the public laws, Heydrich's network was doing something even more dangerous: collecting data.
I saw how they were killed. I was only 100, 150 meters away from the spot. We had a forest track. That's where we kept our vehicle, you see. And from there we could see everything.
Names, families, addresses, occupations, communities. People were being turned into records. And once a government turns human beings into data, the next question becomes horrifying: what will it do with the list? By 1936, Heydrich's influence reached the top. Hitler himself noticed him and called him the man with the iron heart. It was meant as praise. But what kind of man earns a title like that? Then Germany expanded. Austria was next. For years, pressure had built through propaganda, intimidation, and secret organizing. When Germany moved in during 1938, Heydrich arrived quickly and took control of security operations. Arrests began immediately. Political opponents were rounded up. Jewish families were targeted. The same system built in Germany was copied into Austria almost overnight. Control spread like a shadow. Then came Kristallnacht.
On November 9th, 1938, violence erupted across Germany and Austria. Synagogues burned, Jewish homes and businesses were smashed, families were terrorized. But this was not random chaos. Police were told not to stop the violence. Instead, they prepared for arrests of the victims. Tens of thousands of Jewish men were detained and sent to camps. The system did not fail that night. It worked exactly as intended. And Heydrich was central to making it happen.
The plans were in place. If Germany had defeated the Soviet Union, around 90 million Slavs would have been under the control of the Nazis. Of these, 14 million would have been needed as working slaves.
By 1939, war was coming. On September 1, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. But for Heydrich, war did not just mean armies and borders. It meant scale. Millions more people were now under Nazi control. More records, more enemies, more targets. That same year, the Reich Security Main Office was created, combining intelligence, the Gestapo, and criminal police into one massive security structure. Heydrich was placed in charge. One man now stood at the center of surveillance, repression, and organized violence across the Reich. Poland became a testing ground for terror. Ghettos were created. Jewish communities were forced into sealed, overcrowded spaces. Hunger, disease, and fear became daily life. At the same time, Operation Tannenberg targeted Polish leaders, teachers, priests, intellectuals, anyone who could help organize resistance.
Lists had been prepared before the invasion. Arrests came fast. Executions followed. This was not battlefield chaos. It was planned destruction. And then the war moved east. In 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Behind the army came the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units. Their job was not to fight battles. Their job was mass murder. Jewish families, prisoners of war, civilians labeled as threats. Entire groups were rounded up and shot. At Babi Yar, near Kiev, more than 33,000 Jewish people were murdered in just 2 days, and that was only one place. The pattern repeated again and again across the Eastern Front.
Around 30 million were going to be killed. The rest were to be sent over the Ural Mountains into the wilderness of Siberia. All that is personified in Reinhard Heydrich. I am utterly convinced that he would never have hesitated for 1 second, not a single second, to make these unthinkable plans a reality.
This was violence turned into procedure, but even that was not the final form. By 1941, earlier plans for forced emigration had been abandoned. Deporting people out of Europe was no longer considered enough. The regime was moving towards something colder, larger, more systematic. Identification, transport, camps, labor, killing. Everything linked through offices, schedules, and paperwork, and Heydrich stood near the center of that coordination. Then came January 20, 1942, a villa outside Berlin, the Wannsee Conference. Senior officials gathered, not to decide whether the mass murder of Europe's Jews would happen, but to organize how it would be carried out. Numbers were discussed, transport was discussed, responsibilities were assigned. It was one of the most chilling moments in history, because it was not presented as madness, it was presented as administration. And Heydrich led the room.
That is what makes him so terrifying. He was not only violent, he was organized. He could take ideology, hatred, and cruelty and turn them into systems that worked with deadly efficiency. But while all this was happening, Heydrich wanted even more. He trained as a pilot and pushed to fly combat missions, even though he was too valuable to risk. He wanted action, danger, glory. Eventually, he was shot down over enemy territory and somehow survived. Hitler ordered him grounded, no more flying. But soon, Heydrich was sent somewhere just as dangerous, Prague. In September 1941, he became acting ruler of Bohemia and Moravia, the Nazi-controlled Czech lands. Resistance there had been growing, and Berlin wanted it crushed. Heydrich arrived and immediately sent a message. Everything had changed. Martial law, arrests, executions, fear. Within days, people were hanged. Hundreds were detained. Thousands would be imprisoned. Secret police networks spread through the region. Radios were seized. Resistance groups were hunted. But Heydrich did not use terror alone. He mixed fear with rewards, higher wages, better rations, benefits for workers. It was calculated manipulation. Crush the opposition, then keep the factories running. And for a while, it worked. Sabotage dropped, production rose, Berlin praised him. To the Nazi leadership, Prague looked controlled. But beneath the surface, another plan was forming. Heydrich had to be stopped. The Czechoslovak government in exile, working with British support, prepared an assassination mission, Operation Anthropoid. 2 men were chosen, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš. They parachuted into occupied territory, connected with local resistance, and waited. For months, they studied Heydrich's movements. The problem was simple. How do you reach one of the most protected men in Europe? Then they found the weakness. Heydrich often traveled in an open car with limited protection. It was arrogance, image, pride. He did not want to look afraid. On May 27, 1942, Gabčík and Kubiš waited near a sharp bend in Prague, where Heydrich's car would be forced to slow down. The car approached. Gabčík stepped forward, raised his weapon, and pulled the trigger. Nothing. The gun jammed. For 1 second, history froze. Heydrich could have escaped. The driver could have sped away, but Heydrich ordered the car to stop and reached for his pistol. In that moment, Kubiš threw a grenade. The blast tore through the vehicle. Shrapnel ripped into Heydrich's body. He was wounded badly, but still alive. For days, it looked like he might survive. He spoke. Visitors came. Hope remained. Then, infection spread. His body failed. On June 4, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich died at 38 years old. A man obsessed with control was destroyed by one moment he failed to control. But his death did not end the terror. It unleashed revenge. The Nazis responded brutally. Thousands were arrested. The village of Lidice was destroyed. Men were shot. Women and children were deported. Another village, Ležáky, was also wiped out. The assassins were eventually trapped in a Prague church, where they fought for hours before dying rather than surrendering. The mission succeeded, but the cost was devastating. Heydrich's funeral was staged as propaganda. Crowds, speeches, honor, image. Hitler attended and praised him publicly, but privately, even Hitler blamed him for carelessness. One mistake had ended the life of one of the most powerful men in the Nazi regime. And still, the machine continued. The war turned. Germany's victory slowed. The Soviet front pushed back. The Allies advanced. By 1945, Hitler was dead, the regime collapsed, and the crimes of the Nazi system were exposed to the world. Heydrich never stood trial, but his role was undeniable. He was not just a follower. He helped build the systems of surveillance, repression, deportation, and mass murder. He turned fear into administration. He turned information into power. He turned human lives into files, numbers, and transport schedules. That is why Reinhard Heydrich remains so disturbing. Not because he was born obviously evil, not because he looked like a monster from the beginning, but because he shows how dangerous a person can become when ambition, resentment, intelligence, and zero empathy meet a system with no limits. So the final question is this: was Reinhard Heydrich shaped by the darkness of his time, or was he one of the men who made that darkness far worse?